Playbook, a podcast that explores what it takes to create a thriving career right here in the retail auto industry. I'm your host, Michael Cirillo. Delighted, joyed, thrilled to be joined by Matt Lasher, the Director of Marketing for the West Herr Auto Group. You got to pay attention. This is a digital masterclass. Okay, so this has been a long time coming, but you know what I found? I found that the conversations that have to brew and stew for a little bit really turn out to be deep and tremendous and super valuable. They're the ones that I always get a ton of feedback on. And of course, this is no different. Matt, man, like I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while, especially I've been following you on LinkedIn, which I recommend everybody that listens go and check out Matt's profile and the things that he posts. You're how many stores are in your group that you're now overseeing the marketing of?
Yeah, the elevator pitch on West Herr, we're a 26-store group in Buffalo, New York, 26 and growing. So that number, maybe by the time this podcast is released, will be bigger probably. But 26 stores, 2,200 employees. We sell 50,000 cars a year. We service 450,000. And the most unique thing about West Herr is all of our locations and everything that we do is within 60 miles of each other. And 80% of what we do is within 30 miles of each other. So super, super densely populated in Western New York, Buffalo, New York.
Wow. How do you get into that? Like, what's your journey in the car business been to get you into the seat you're sitting in now?
Sure. Yeah. So out of college, I worked at Nissan North America and fresh out of college, consumer affairs, 1-800-NISSAN. Thank you for calling Nissan. This is Matt. How can I help you?
Nice.
And got a job sort of through the ranks there, doing some sales and marketing jobs for the Infinity West region out in Southern California, and just looked around, didn't want to be any of my bosses. So I quit. I had $10,000 to my name. I was 25. I sold t-shirts out of the trunk of my car and I played poker for 2 years to pay my bills. So that was fun. Great time, San Francisco, Las Vegas. But I wanted to get married, have kids. I had an opportunity to sell cars at West Herr. So I moved back to my hometown, Buffalo, New York, sold cars, did finance. I was a finance manager during Cash for Clunkers, for those that remember that. I was a sales manager, used car manager for a few years. And I've been in this marketing role now, I guess 8, maybe 9, almost 9 years now. Right. And so a lot has changed. We didn't have a marketing department prior to me. So we had more of sales oriented mindset. And we had a fragmented advertising sort of strategy where some people would do parts of things. So for many years, it was really just me being like the Tasmanian devil, trying to get our arms around how many different things that were out there. And then slowly but surely, we've got this sort of gravity that is a marketing team now. And I got a bunch of people that help me execute, and it's been great. So going from the sales side of things into marketing, like what was it about the marketing that kind of pulled you back into it? Well, I've always been sort of a marketer by trade. Like if I think about why I even sold t-shirts out of the trunk of my car, I just wanted a brand to market. So I had a Shopify site in 2006. Wow. I was making YouTube videos back in 2006 and 2007. I wish I would have stayed on the YouTube path because I probably wouldn't be even talking to you now. I'd be just
that'd be a diamond YouTube plaque on the wall behind you instead of the buffalo. Right. Yeah.
So I think I've just always had that in me, knew that I wanted to do that. And I've had this opportunity here to sort of help curate and shape the West Herr brand. So it's just been a part of my thing. It's something I've been always interested in. The car business is great for that, right? We get to play with every marketing tool, tactic, technique that's out there. And it's a great privilege to represent not only a company that does it the right way, right? So I think I wouldn't be as successful here if we didn't have like that end execution. I talk mostly about, the human element of our business. And I think marketing needs that. Marketing needs tons of empathy towards the sales side of the organization. And sometimes it can be a combative situation, I think, where one side feels like they're pulling more of the weight, but both sides need to respect each other. And, I'm tremendously grateful for our team on the front lines doing it every day, man, when they're just working hard.
Yeah. You've been, I look to you as an example. I mean, you're very open and vocal. Like when I see your posts on LinkedIn, like you bring people inside of your organization with every post. You're giving more insights. I know with COVID, and we've here at the podcast, we've kind of moved on from the COVID conversation. But I know, you were very upfront because the narrative in the industry tended to lean towards, well, I still have my mask too, by the way. but as far as like, like anything, right? Human nature, something happens and just we all leach towards it. And very quickly, the whole digital retail conversation really started to creep into things. And I remember right out of the gates, you're like, look, I got 26 rooftops. Here's what we found. We've played with a lot of digital retail models. And I think a lot of people would be shy of, well, we know for a fact in this industry, a lot of people are shy of bringing people transparently into their organization. What is it that drives you to want to share that narrative out in the industry?
I think it's just a self-awareness of being vulnerable and like embracing your vulnerabilities. There's power in that, right? Like, I think there's so much ego and fronting in our business, especially in the marketing side. People are afraid to not know the answer, right? And I think I'm okay. I want to be proven wrong, right? I mean, my technique often in a lot of conversations, especially when it gets into this gray area of like what's working and what's not, I might give an extreme opinion I don't even believe in because I want to hear what the person on the other side of the table says. Often if they don't push back, I know that they don't know what they're talking about. Yeah. Right. And they're just sort of using talking points and that sort of thing. But I think it's really important that we're all on this journey together and we're all figuring it out. And there's things that are, like Instagram stories, where a place where we execute on wasn't a thing, a couple of years ago. Right. Yeah. So nobody knows exactly like how it should go. And I think we should have fun with that. We should be okay with the fact that, we could try this. And also, ultimately we make all sorts of different decisions, especially at a company like West Herr. We make inconsistent decisions with money, right? Not everything's perfectly optimized. I think in digital marketing space, we want to like optimize everything, but often there's like these political decisions. There's reasons why you're making a decision that's like, okay, this tool might suck, but I'm going to like sign up for it anyways because of some of these macro decisions. So I think that nuance is an important thing worth talking about and exploring. But just being vulnerable, man, and self-aware, I think is the only way forward for people to connect.
That's amazing. Does that feed into, I guess your opinions around OEM programs, CoOp programs, or mandated this and that? Do you think that's more of a political thing and there's kind of outlying decisions as to why I would be a part of that or not be a part of it?
Yeah, I think there's a tremendous pressure on dealer groups like West Herr that represent all these brands. It's a great privilege to be a new car dealer, right? And it's a franchise and it's basically a monopoly. Call it what it is, right? Like if you want to buy a Subaru in Buffalo, New York, there's one of two choices you have currently, right? Sure. And so with that comes a responsibility. So we have to play the game that the OEMs think that they're playing. The OEMs, because I worked at Nissan, I'm sympathetic to this idea of or empathetic towards managing a dealer network. So you have a dealer network that has a variety of skill and aptitude and awareness and all of this stuff. So if you're an executive at a manufacturer, you're trying to move the ball forward. And sometimes it hurts the innovative dealers. It hurts the dealers that know what they're doing. Because now you're going to bring the bottom performers up a little bit, and maybe you bring the top performers down through these like mandates, through these sort of difficult structures to programs. And the co-op programs add a huge distortion to it. My biggest issue with the co-op programs is lack of transparency with vendor billing and how certain things and deals are made. The Shift Digitals of the world have added a lot of expense and construct to our digital ecosystem that's often not necessary. I have, 6 or 7 performance manager people that try to call me to like give me feedback on one of my 40 websites.
Sure.
I don't have time to even talk to this person and they don't know anything about our digital ecosystem.
Right.
But yet we're paying for that. I know that's built into the, matrix, right? Like Shift is getting their money for that person plus the profit, right? Along with sort of opaque billings and like you don't even know what percentage is admin fee and what actually goes to media spend. But really, digital retailing as an example, I think we were chatting before this started. I'm pretty against digital retailing as it sits today. I'm a huge proponent of customer affordability and customer payments because I think we're all payment driven. But I think the tools today are broken. I think every digital retailing tool is solving the wrong problem. They believe that customers can get to the correct VDP. Customers don't know what they can afford. That's why there's 350 salespeople at West Herr. Customers don't know what their options are. That's why they ask, hey, I need like a third row seat. What are my choices? Right? we're framing these tools as like a panacea that every consumer is going to be able to find themselves on this perfect car, and they're going to be able to work through this 8-step process to negotiate something. Right. And it's just it's a fraudulent, effort to say this is the way forward. I think we're trying to evolve, and I'll be sympathetic to the vendors too. Like, look, you got to start somewhere, right? But this mad dash over the last 6 months to install digital retailing and push it into the dealer network, totally wrong.
Yeah.
We have now 3 digital retailing tools that we've committed to, 3 different tools within our organization. I want one tool if I have to have one, but we have 3 different tools because of political pressure and because of OEM nuance. Mm-hmm. So now we're just increasing the fragmentation of our consumer experience, which is going to make it overall net negative experience for somebody shopping at West Herr. So if I'm competing against Carvana or Amazon or whomever, I've now made it infinitely more difficult to manage the programs. The user experiences are different. A customer doesn't know what they're even getting when they go to one of West Herr's websites versus another, right? So it's created a huge problem. And at present, there's really no solution. But we make these decisions out of political reasons. So like I mentioned at the beginning of the OEM relationship, we have a responsibility to be a good corporate partner. And so, look, we can take this short term and say, fine. We'd love to educate the OEMs that'll listen in terms of we've been doing this for a few years. We have some context and perspective. One of the brands we had to install a digital retailing tool on, we sell 65% of the new vehicles in the market.
Wow.
So, but they forced the digital retailing tool on us, claiming that we were going to lose market share if we didn't have it. And we know that to not be true, but we did it anyways because we want the product. Yeah. We want to keep getting the product to sell.
Right.
So, so CoOp creates a huge distortion, especially when dealers think it's free money. The General Motors program in particular, most vendors sell me stuff that's like, oh, it's co-ops. Well, what they don't ever understand is that the way the General Motors program works is it's not 100% reimbursed. It's 40 cents on the dollar. So I'm still paying for it with dealer money. It's going into a bucket that I have to use on approved expenses or whatever,
sure.
But it's not 100%. It's my money to begin with. Right. And they frame it as like, well, it's free, and I think dealers even misunderstand programs at times. So it's a fascinating ecosystem. I think there's some challenge. There's probably some good, but it is stifling innovation. It is disrupting the consumer experience, and it's not allowing the most innovative dealers to go. I think if you're a CSI is strong and you're a good operator, you should be able to use whatever tool set you want. Right. You should be able to create the tech stack that you want, because that's how we'll get more dealers, regionalized dealer groups like a $2 billion West Herr that can fight with a Carvana. We're big enough to make our own tech. We're big enough to invent, and go in those spaces. So, I hope that there's a little more open-mindedness, but I'm not confident that 20 OEMs will all of a sudden come to like see the light bulb and be like, oh, you know what, Matt, you're right. Let's give you free reign.
Yeah. And do you think there's the element one layer up from the dealer between Shift Digital and the OEM, where the OEM's like, okay, well, they're just going to make this whole thing easier for us because they know, quote unquote, know what needs to happen. Mm-hmm. And so then that deal happens, and then that deal gets passed on to you like, hey, that's why we're a part of this program. That's why we've selected them. They've got the experience.
No doubt, Shift and others proclaim that they have all the answers of how this will self-manage this. So the deal is with the executive at the OEM, who probably doesn't have enough experience in this realm, right? There's just not that many OEM marketing executives and that sort of thing that have had retail operation experience. So they're not, because it's a different skill set. To manage an OEM is a different game than managing the dealers, right?
Sure.
So here I am, CEO or CMO at Nissan. I have a problem. I have 1,000 Nissan dealers that are poorly performing in digital. But I'd say this, I think the mistake is believing that they need to solve the dealer's problem. I think the OEMs should focus entirely on their tier one efforts. They already spend millions of dollars on their OEM website. The configurators are better than the dealer websites. The emotive pictures, the package descriptions, the incentives, all that stuff is already available. Now, what they need to do a better job of connecting to the dealer network is just providing leads back to the dealer operators, right? Don't care about the tier 3 ecosystem. Just let the dealers, the innovative ones, do what they're going to do. The subpar ones are going to do what they're going to do also, right? Just by mandating some, approved vendor for a website doesn't mean that you've solved the problem. So I think if they just back up a bit on the tier 3 side and focus entirely on how can they distribute leads via their tier 1 website and focus all their marketing efforts towards the Ford.coms of the world, the Chevy.coms of the world. That can work within the dealer franchise model. They just need to distribute the leads, equitably, and whatever rules they want to, come up with for that.
Yeah. And I mean, there's the layer from where you are, basically rubber meets the road, essentially, where you're going to have ultimately infinitely a better understanding of what drives your market and consumers in your markets than they will. There's just no possible way to have enough people internally at an OEM dedicated to each market. I mean, you have your regional manager, but that regional manager is not living in the community 9 times out of 10. They're not seeing the subtle nuances of the economic drivers in that area, or they're not understanding why Corollas are not selling in the prairies where 80% of the people make their living off of agriculture, and why you're ultimately selling more trucks and less of this. And but they get their things that say, hey, well, you need to sell this. You're not showing up on this report the way that we need you to show up, et cetera, et cetera. And so it really, what it reminds me of? It reminds me of book publishing. When I published my book, there were so many differing opinions, and I basically came down to, you guys know how to publish a book, you have no idea how to market it.
Yeah.
You're like, you know how to create the actual book, but you have no idea how to actually sell books. Like, there's no way I'm buying 11,000 copies of my own book so I can make a New York Times bestseller list.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
That's
I've never heard that analogy before, but I really like it. I mean, especially as it relates to automotive, I think the OEMs are terrible about marketing their own product to the dealer network. Like, so there's examples where I don't know about a new product launch. Like, Lincoln renamed all their lineup, right? Corsair and Nautilus and all this stuff. It took me probably a year to figure out what's what again, and and so look, if I'm having a hard time understanding what things are. Yeah, exactly. So I think sometimes even like if we think about micro content now, we think about as marketers, what we do to distribute content across networks and other things. Like, it's almost like the OEMs could do a better job of creating micro and usable content for people like me. Be like, hey, look, I don't know how you're going to use it. I don't know where you're going to even put it, but here's a 15-second thing that could be suitable for Instagram stories. Okay, cool. Let me download it. Let me be able to play with it or do something with it. Maybe edit it. Maybe add a logo to it or something.
Sure.
But or what about these build configurators? Why can't that just be syndicated to every dealer website? Why do the website providers have their own that is not as good, right? Like, it just optimize it. If it's an A/B test sort of optimization thing, the dealers aren't going to do it. So just solve for it. Here's how we want the configurator path to go, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think so. I don't think the OEMs think enough about that, and they don't empower their field staff to know enough about that. They put pressure on their field staff to check boxes. You mentioned pandering to a report, right? So often we have these group reports of leads or whatever, time on site or, bounce rate or something.
I was going to say bounce rate.
Yeah. Or, conversion percentage, whatever. And so we get compared against all the other dealers in the region on a report that means nothing. And somehow we're supposed to pander to that report, right? Well,
don't you want your dealer excellence awards?
Three Birds and others, they have these report card things, and you're looking at this one little fragmented piece of an ecosystem. Westher.com represents over 50% of our website ecosystem. So we have a website, group site, that's on par with Cars.com and Auto Trader and Car Gurus in our market, right? And so it gets 10 to 15 times the traffic as a single standalone website gets in our network.
Wow.
So when an OEM comes to me to talk to me about my one child site that gets 10,000 sessions or less a month, right? I'm like, yeah, sure. What do you need? What's wrong right now? It's like that Mark Zuckerberg quote in the social network where he's like, you're getting my minimum amount of attention required or whatever. I forget exactly how that scene was. I don't know.
Yeah. It's basically, if I have to sit here and listen to you, if the choice is to sit here and listen to you or watch Shaquille O'Neal star in the movie Kazam, I'm going to watch him star in the worst movie ever made. Yeah, I'm with you.
I will say there is some value and some actually talented Shift Digital type reps that like do care about their job and like they're doing a good, like we had a CTA was broken on one of our child sites and I didn't know about it for like 6 months. A Shift Digital person came in and was like auditing this website and was like, hey, why don't you have this? It was like an e-price button or something. Why don't you have this e-price button? And I was like, I don't know. That's weird. Where is it? Right.
Yeah.
And it turned out like it just broke somehow. Like our vendor broke it. And okay, that was good value add. Like you found something that was clearly broken, like good.
Yeah,
like,
and you know what I would say to that too? Like I agree with that. I don't think any of these companies start with an evil intention. You know, like you mentioned the social dilemma earlier. We watched it the other night, my wife and I'm like, I need to share this, but I feel trapped because the only place I know where to share it is on social. And I think there was a comment made. It was the former president of Pinterest, who was also the director of monetization. He's basically created the monetary model for Facebook. He said, you know, there were so many good things happening, and that was really our intention. You know, long lost family members were connecting with one another. People were solving crimes, like there were missing people were being found. We didn't anticipate the flip side of that coin, which was, but how are people going to start to figure out how to use this? And I think, you know, to the point of this conversation, I don't think anybody sat down, the OEM, Shift Digital, any of these companies sat down and they're like, we're going to do wrong by everything. But I think we, as a whole, we tend to be naive to the flip side of that coin, which is, but what happens when we introduce the monetization model? What happens when we hire people and don't pay attention to our own internal culture? And now we hire somebody that actually doesn't really care and they're just here to pick up a paycheck. They might have the knowledge and expertise, but they don't care about their dealer network. Or like there's so many different factors that feed to the whole narrative of basically where we've arrived today, that the easiest thing I think as a whole for us to see is the fact that everything is just super political and it's greed driven. Like that's kind of how it looks. And then everybody's left off.
Like the Ford signed up Auto Alert as like a thing, right? So like the Ford dealers are going to use Auto Alert. We had been using Auto Alert for 5 years prior to that. Right. The Auto Alert deal, which there was a former Ford executive that worked at Auto Alert. So there was a backdoor relationship tie in there. And they pushed it onto the dealer network, basically requiring it because it created an incentive that you couldn't get otherwise unless you had Auto Alert. So our costs went up for Auto Alert, right? We already had an established relationship. We had been using it for years. Right. So our costs for that tool went up. I went straight to the Ford execs. I'm like, what gives? Like, how are you going to make me pay more for something we've already been using? But ultimately, like, that's the game. And so that margin, right, that paid for something. It paid for, you know, the Ford Direct Initiative or, you know, offsetting some of the extra incentive that went into the tool. But there's not always that level of transparency. So I agree. I don't think things started at a nefarious level, but I do think that they grow that way over time because people's business objectives and goals are not in alignment. An OEM's goal is to wholesale as many cars as they can, right? A dealership's goal is to maximize profit within their own ecosystem, taking inventory and selling used cars and service, right? They do not have the same goals, right? So ultimately, you know, they're not mutually aligned. So I think it's interesting when OEMs push technology and process into the dealership because it's not really their process to define.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? And I love what you just said about, well, we've got two different goals here. And I don't think sometimes and that feeds into what you were saying earlier about self-awareness. We don't realize that there actually is a disconnect. And the sooner that we understand that there is a disconnect between their goals and our goals, I think that's a huge bridge that we can cross to start making connections about, okay, well then how do we align, or what can we do to maybe get the best alignment so that things seem much more sequential and much more unified?
Sure. I mean, look at like a Cox, for example, right? We'll pick on them for a second. Cox buys dealer.com for $4 billion from DealerTrack or whatever, buys dealer.com. Right. And what's their incentive? Their incentive is to maximize revenue, the reoccurring revenue of the 10 or 15,000 dealer clients that they have within that portfolio. They do not have the incentive to innovate and disrupt themselves. What they want is to get the $4 billion back that they spent, right? And then after they start making enough money that they feel comfortable, they're like, maybe we'll dabble in some innovation. Right. And so we as the dealer partners are like sort of left behind holding the bag of these dysfunctional organizations. When CDK buys eLead, well, is CDK going to innovate eLead? No, they're going to roll with eLead, what it is, and the 3,500 dealers that use it, or whatever, 4,000 dealers that use it, and they're just going to milk that cow for as long as until they start getting dealer defections, or maybe there's an upstart that like starts taking share,
Sure.
and they're like, well, now we got to do something. So these big tech conglomerates are totally not in alignment with a dealership like a West Herr that really wants to innovate and push, and like, I want the best consumer experience possible, whether it's in-store, digital, at home. I don't care. Like, I want it to be seamless. I want us to know who you are, contextualized, right? I want to understand those problems, and I want our team to understand that problem so we can be fast and nimble and, educated and make a great experience. So the tools that we have today, though, will never get us there. And there's no incentive for the vendors that we have today to do it.
Yeah. Wow. That's like... That's the perfect summation I think I've heard in a long time of just the challenge that we face. So my question is, what do we do? Do we just merely have to exist then? What can we be doing then I love that you're using the term ecosystem. I think that's just the perfect explanation of everything that encompasses all the moving pieces. So what can we do inside of our ecosystems for the dealer owner, or the marketing director, or the sales manager who's listening right now? Where does their focus, in your opinion, need to be in order to make the most of all the spinning plates?
It's really about process and self-awareness. Like, every dealership's going to have, I think, their different things that they care mostly about. But you know what? Often it's the non-glamorous hard work every day. So the Buffalo Bills hired Sean McDermott as the head coach of the Bills, and his phrase was trust the process, right? Not caring about the result, but caring about what are we doing every day to get better, right? Hiring the right people, recruiting the right players that have fit within the culture, going to practice, giving everything you got every moment of every opportunity, and trying to get incrementally better. And I can tell you at West Herr, like, we live that out of, like, I don't know how Scott did that exactly, but he's a humble guy, but he's created this sense of urgency and almost anxiety or insecurity in all of us as alpha top performers, that there's no satisfaction. I mean, I think we sold, 5,500 cars or something last month, but like, we spent like 5 seconds high-fiving each other maybe.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, how do we get better? Like, what do we do next?
It's like the Chicago Bulls.
For sure. Totally. Because you have to. So what I loved about The Last Dance was Michael Jordan's ability to craft a narrative amongst like a rookie in the league or something. He created a construct to be aggressive or competitive against. Right. Yeah. And I see the best operators in automotive doing the same thing. They care about winning every scenario, every situation. We don't want to fall flat ever. So when we make a mistake, we got to do better than even. We got to make it right. We got to exceed customers' expectations, not in a generic CSI way, but like in a legitimate, wow, we actually did something above and beyond. And as we grow, our scale and challenge to that is, how do we do that at scale? Like, Scott Beeler is notorious for driving around every dealership on a Saturday, giving hundreds out of his wallet to customers. Well, that doesn't scale when you're doing the amount of transactions that we're doing. And when we grow to 40 or 50 dealerships, right, how are we going to do that? Sure. But that's where I think technology and systems and caring about marketing and the process, trusting the process, will matter. But, even if you're a single point today, go to your CRM. Did you look at your CRM today? Did you look at the 10 people that you talked to yesterday?
Right.
Did you follow up on the 7 that you didn't sell? Did you call them today? Like, it's not about necessarily getting new customers. It's about doing better with the customers you already have. Sure. And like, it's like a social media recommendation, right? Like, they say, don't worry about how many followers you got. Don't worry. We care about that one comment. If somebody gives you a comment, engage with it. Sure. Like, I don't have 1 million followers. I'm not like some celebrity or whatever. Right. So if somebody's taking the time out of their day to like give me their opinion on something that's related to what I posted about, I want to thank them for that, or engage with it, or recognize it. Same thing in the car business. If somebody walked through your door at the dealership, you got to be so appreciative and thankful. And what can you do to move the ball forward? Maybe you don't sell them a car this time. Sometimes when we don't sell cars and we lose it to a competitor, we send a letter for $1,000 off their next purchase. So cool. Mr. Cirillo, we didn't earn your business this time around. Obviously we're disappointed in that. We want to do better. We want to do what we can to earn your business next time. Here's a letter for $1,000 off. Wow. like yeah. Go. You know what I'm saying? And like, look, we're human. We screw up, and we got to acknowledge that. And you know, we mentioned vulnerability. That needs to be in our process too. Arrogant managers or arrogant, like egocentric people, that is not going to be the way forward in this world of connection and like experience. So, you know, being self-aware to how your organization runs like that. Like, does the sales manager actually get up and talk to the customer? If they don't, maybe that's something that you focus on. Right? Trust the process, right? Yeah. What can you do to eliminate friction, eliminate pain, eliminate confusion, speed up the process in the dealership? I don't hear a lot of people talking about that, but throughput, I think, is going to be the next chapter for dealerships. And how can we be more efficient with the same number or less number of people in our building and sell the same number or more cars, right? How do we get more done with fewer people, fewer resources? And, you know, it'll be interesting to see how we do that, but I think technology will have to help us partly.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, you know, and that's the point. I think for me, you know, technology, the early innovation of tech in the auto industry made everybody believe. And by the way, this was the narrative that was pushed. It's like, hey, sign up for a insert website provider here, and you're going to get more traffic, leads, and sales. And we had a solid 15 to 18 years of all of them saying, no, our websites are going to help you get more traffic, leads, and sales. And then a new tech startup happens and that they say, no, our tool solves this problem. That's going to help you get more traffic, leads, and sales. We created a total dependency upon the tech rather than using it to offset or maximize or make more scalable the things that truly matter as a foundational point of reference. Like you said, the manager coming and talking to people himself. I mean, gosh, you go to an Applebee's and the manager walks around and says, hey, how are you enjoying your visit with us?
Can I get you a water, right? Can I get you a new water?
No, but I'm a manager. I used to be a lot boy and a salesperson, and now I'm a sales. I don't get people coffee.
We use a tool that costs $249 for our whole group. It's called Delighted. It's a net promoter score survey. And what it does is anybody that spends money at West Herr, anybody, sales, service, whatever, they get an email on a scale of 0 to 10. How likely are you to recommend the West Herr Auto Group to a friend? It's intentionally generic. It's not how was your experience at the Subaru store.
Sure.
Would you recommend the West Herr Auto Group to a friend? About 7% of the time, which is actually really low, but 7% of the time we get a 6 or less. If we get a 6 or less, we have a process where we notify the managers are on it. Like we call the customer, we try to make it. We screwed up. Usually we screwed up. Like the 30-minute oil change took 2.5 hours, or, you know, they said they'd have the car ready for me to test drive when I got there and I still waited for an hour and a half or whatever, like whatever happened. Right. Yeah. We get that feedback. It does not increase the number of reviews that we get on Google. It does not do anything for our OEM measurements or report cards or whatever, but it does show us, you know, what's happened. Now that's the negative side, but the positive side, which I'm a big proponent of focusing and high-fiving positive feedback, about 80% of the time we're getting somebody that gives us a 9 or 10. So sometimes they put comments, or often they put comments of like, so-and-so was great. Mm-hmm. Well, that gives us an opportunity as a management team to go talk to that person that actually did the work and say, hey, high five. You did an awesome job with Matt. Like, good job. You know? And, you know, I think managers, we always have the tendency to focus on the negative, and like, maybe that's just human nature, the human condition. I'm not sure. But ultimately, there's a lot to be gained with focusing on the sun and the positive too.
Yeah. I think you're right about that. It's like, if I point out the problem, then it gives us an opportunity to work on it.
Yep.
Not realizing, no, there's actually a lot more that can come from positive reinforcement. And you know, I remember the story. Shoot, I wish I remember the book. Maybe it's How to Win Friends and Influence People. That sounds about right. It's about the test pilot who made a mistake and ended up, you know, crashing the plane, and, you know, whatever it was, $50 million plane, and super expensive. And he was super afraid of seeing the CEO of the company and facing him, and there's the CEO, and he could see him as he parachutes down to the ground, and you can see the CEO standing there, and he's just freaked out. And as he approaches the hangar, the CEO is like, are you okay? Are you safe? Are you good? Yeah. Yes. I bet you learned one thing you're not going to do next time. Like, it was like, you know, he didn't have to razz on him. He didn't have to whatever. To me, that's very positive, like, way of, okay, cool. So we just lost 50 mil or whatever the dollar figure was. But are you okay, first and foremost? And I bet you learned something you're not going to do next time. Yeah. Okay. Well,
love that. I love those subtle leadership examples. I mean, there's all sorts of stories where you see those really excellent leaders take advantage of those moments in time and those opportunities.
Yeah. And I think, such a huge impact on where things can go. I think sometimes we forget, based on the whole technology conversation, that it is actually the people in this business, the powerful, great, capable, talented, beautiful, amazing people in this industry that are the ones that are going to move it forward, not the dependency upon one tech alone. I look at examples. I brought this up on the podcast before. When we often think about disruption, we think of companies like Airbnb or Uber or whatever. But when you really look at the concepts or the philosophy behind disruptive innovation, it has nothing to do with, some small startup that came up with a new, fresh concept. It has to do with serving the needs of a specific market in a way that a larger incumbent could not do it. Well, in the case of Uber, so it gets misrepresented. We think in order to be disruptive, we have to come up with something that's never existed before. Is that really what Uber did? Ride sharing existed, taxi cabs existed, people paying for it existed, people were already paying for rides. Cars already existed. They didn't invent those. They didn't invent the internet, payment processing, smartphone apps. They just took resources that already existed and marketed it in a new experience for a specific, target market. And now look, 10 years later, which, by the way, they started during the last recession, 10, 12 years later, they're now in a position where they can be handing out billions in relief and, philanthropic type, offerings to a market simply because they assembled things that already exist. And so I love what you're talking about. You're talking about, hey, I've already got a tool set that already exists. How I leverage it, how I leverage people, how I leverage process or have the right process to leverage all of this. That's what actually is going to make the difference.
And there's an art to like focus decision making and what things do you care about. So, and we all struggle, even a group like West Herr, we struggle with caring about too many things, right? We have too many initiatives, too many things to focus on.
Yeah.
And often you don't get the depth or, the push that's required because you're a little bit scattered, right? So you're like doing this thing real fast and you're moving on to the other thing.
Right.
But there's an art and a skill. And that's like the most senior leaders of our industry, especially in the retail side, need to set those agendas really intentionally, and just be interested in how can we thrive. Dealership groups are customer service organizations. That's what we are, right? Like, so we need to be all in whatever mechanisms and ways that matter to best serve customers. Otherwise, we're just a commodity throughput that's very easily replaced by Amazon, right? Yeah. Amazon has a better buying experience. So when they start selling Toyota Corollas, and they got 10 Toyota dealerships that they can drop ship from, you better have a customer experience that's worth something, right?
Yeah.
Now that sort of goes a little too far and like discounts our people. But I know I view that as like a longer term risk of like something that could take certainly the commodity business. I still think that there's an art to this business and like understanding people say they want a Corolla, but they leave in a Hummer. Like, like things like that happen all the time. So, like people don't really know what they want, which is why there's real estate agents still, right? Sure. Like, these types of things, like human beings can guide other human beings. And there's a skill in that, that I think is often discounted by the tech providers and the OEMs who maybe don't fully understand it because they never sold a car in their life.
It's so funny you say real estate agents, because for the longest time I felt like, it was so nice to sell my own home standing next to a real estate agent. Because for the longest time I was like, what are you even doing? Like, cool, you put an ad on MLS or realtor.com or whatever it is. But at the end of the day, I was there. You told me not to be here, but you had all these showings and no luck. And then I end up selling my own house and I got to pay you the 20 grand or 20. And then I realized though, and this was years after when maybe I had gained a little more self-awareness. I'm like, but it was really worth it having them there when I was like, wait, should I bring this up?
Yeah.
Or wait, should I show them that? Or is this a big deal? And to have their understanding of the market and their experience to counsel me, that's worth something. It can't be discredited. And we see that all the time. Yeah, there's this negative stigma in the car industry that, is hopefully going away. But I mean, people still don't realize, even when they leave a bad review, how integrated the sales professional was in their decision-making process and showing them and trying to make it as easy as possible. And so I find it interesting where you'll read a negative review and it's like, yeah, it took so long and they did that, but Matt was good. Matt really was able to show us a couple of things that we never saw. But it's like, yeah, do you not realize that helped you make the purchase?
Well, consumer demands are really challenging and increasing, and it's hard to fully execute, right? And that's what our challenge is, to continue to improve the experience, make it faster, make it more flexible, give it the Burger King treatment, have it your way or whatever.
Sure.
And I think we need to continue to strive for that, and looping full circle with all the co-op and OEM and mandates in our industry. I just don't believe that that's going to create the flexibility necessary to move us forward in meaningful ways. Maybe we'll take incremental steps forward, but it's just going to be real challenging. If it's always this fragmented world, it's going to be hard, right?
Yeah, right. Love it, man. I do have one more question for you, and it's all about how does an individual overseeing the work of 26 and counting rooftops manage to get unified buy-in? But we're going to save the answer for our exclusive DPB Pro community. I know that's a question that a lot of people have. How do you get buy-in? Well, if you want to hear the answer, definitely go check out our Facebook DPB Pro group. Apply for membership. Hey, this is not your typical group. This is not where you complain about your pay plan and your comp plan. And then this is where we talk about gratitude, positivity, culture, leadership, the things that we've talked about in essence that Matt has given a masterclass on in this episode of the podcast. But if you want to hear his answer about how he manages expectation and gets buy-in across such a massive group, you're going to have to apply and join over in the DPB Pro community on Facebook. Matt, man, seriously, a masterclass. Like, I love this conversation, dude. You are so dialed in. I could listen to you talk about this stuff for hours and hours and hours. And trust me, people that know me know that when I say stuff like that, it's authentic and genuine. If you sucked, I'd probably tell you it sucked. But this was phenomenal, dude. And I'm so glad that we were able to connect. How can those listening connect with you and just follow your narrative and your outlook on the industry?
I would say the easiest way to get at me is find me on LinkedIn, Matt Lasher. And I try to be responsive to DMs and other things, but similar to the podcast, I'm not that receptive to cold pitches. So be careful. Be careful there. I might call you out for a lazy pitch. But yeah, just look me up, Matt Lasher. So happy to connect and, appreciate whoever listened and, would love the feedback to the show too. So, if you disagreed with something, I love that too. So
amazing. Thanks so much for joining me on the Dealer Playbook podcast.
You got it, buddy.
I'm Michael Cirillo, and you've been listening to the Dealer Playbook podcast. If you haven't yet, please click the subscribe button wherever you're listening right now. Leave a rating or review and share it with a colleague. If you're ready to make big changes in your life and career and want to connect with positive, nurturing automotive professionals, join my exclusive DPB Pro community on Facebook. That's where we share information, ideas, and content that isn't shared anywhere else. I can't wait to meet you there. Thanks for listening.